Welcome to the Founders Odyssey podcast, where we create an environment for founders to thrive through education, inspiration, and a supportive community. My name is Nathan Bird, and I will be your host today. We are joined by special guest all the way from Stockholm, Sweden, Arnaud Henneville. Arnaud is a mentor, advisor, investor, published author, and contains wisdom from his immense experience as a founder of a successful corporate SaaS platform enabling efficient and effective collaboration in the workplace called Internal Desk. Through this company, they successfully raised their seed and Series A round and signed multi-year contracts with some of the most recognized companies in the world, including GE Healthcare, PSA Group, Volkswagen Financial Services, just to name a few. His nationally recognized book called How Hard Can It Be has just released and covers in detail the truth behind developing a startup technology company and what it takes in order to make it to acquisition. It is his passion to make significant differences in the people's lives he comes across and believes you too can do the same. Welcome to the show today. We are looking forward to hearing more about your story today.
Wow, thank you, Nathan. What an intro. Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, I give respect where respect is due, my friend. And you've done a lot, you've been places, you've seen a lot of things. And today we're going to uncover that for our audience to hear, to experience, and really just to get to know you a little bit better. So let's dive into the famous question: how did you get started in business, and what enthralls you about it?
Yeah, that's a good start. I guess I've always been a guy in business. I mean, since young age, I've always been passionate about doing all sorts of things and hopefully generating something out of those initiatives. Yes. Early on, and then that grew and ended up doing business school, and along the way I did try several startups, most of which didn't work out the way I had planned for them. But I guess after some reflection, I think most of them didn't work because I didn't go fully in them. They were mostly the so-called today
side hustles,
what you would call side hustles. And if you half-ass committed, I guess you get half-ass the results. So eventually, years of attempts, I came to the conclusion that if I was to get something really substantial out of any of my entrepreneurial attempts, I would have to go really all in. And that's what I ended up doing with this last venture, which I guess we're going to spend more time talking about today.
Oh, we'll talk about that. I'm excited to hear more, but I'm also excited to hear more about your inspiration as a young kid, right? So take us through just a little bit. I know you fast forwarded real quick all the way up into the SaaS platform you guys have successfully built. Let's talk a little bit about, those inspirational moments that you had that really drive your vision, your passion today.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. To be honest, I haven't really spent much time on that kind of reflection. What took me to where I am today. All I know is, and this is going to come straight from the gut, is that I've always been driven by, I've never thought that someone will, give me something on a plate and I would have to, live with what I was given. I always thought of me, something bigger than that I would create from myself, and, that I would generally create out of thin air. So I've always been, in that mindset of I deserve more. I ought to get more out of this, and why not try? And of course, most of your friends, they don't think that way. I guess, general population doesn't necessarily think in terms of, trying something that would be sort of judged as or viewed as, complicated or out of the norm. Yes. or not in line with what and where you should be at that point in your life. And so, but that has always been my thing. I mean, my drive. And so to come back from where I come from, I'm a French, 100% French. And in a French culture, so if you haven't done the right things at the right pace, like if you haven't gone to school, done the right schools and followed up with the military service and then done the right, first job and second job and so forth, you quickly fall off the, the conveyor belt, so to say. So
yes.
I've never been, I've never followed the typical path as far as French curriculum goes, so yeah, in that view, I've always been a bit different, which is why I guess having done all the stuff I've done afterwards, living abroad, I've lived in many, many countries before ending up where I am today, which is in Sweden. My atypical path, a typical background, I guess, has given me a richer experience, greater view of, the stuff that one can do with one life. And if the whole purpose of life is actually to uncover yourself, find out who you really are at the core, I guess I've been given an advantage because it's never been typical. I've never followed the red tape, so to say.
Well, and that's very interesting to say because, there's a few things that I've taken so far. You've got an adventurous spirit, which I think a lot of the entrepreneurs that listen to this out there, or people that listen to this, are the same. So in that regards, we share a very similar, a similar viewpoint of life. And just like that piece of art behind you, the artist has to think outside the box to create something just like that, right? So it's interesting that you say, well, I think I had this natural inclination to think outside the box and to create. Well, it's interesting because as humans, we have that in our DNA. We have that inclination to want to create, right? To want to think outside the box, to, develop and to get to the next level, right? So let's talk about your ambition and where that comes from a little bit, and then how you've managed to continue to go to whatever you consider your next level of success.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're totally right. I mean, I think we all have it, but yet at some point it is being suppressed. And I guess I think it's probably through education, and you have to fit the mold, and you have to conform to that box somehow, and slowly but surely we lose it. And I think it's a shame, and that's one of the things I want to bring with the book and all of what we're going to discuss, notably failure, is that failure, the way I look at it, is the way to really go back to the core of what you should be doing. I mean, the way you should uncover yourself, peel the onion and discover who you really are, can only come from failure, can only come from you trying to slowly expand that box. And as you try stuff and you realize that they don't necessarily align with your vision of who you are maybe and where you want to be, at least it gives you, pointers, direction as to how to refocus your energy. So yeah, failure is a big one for me. But your question was, where does that come from? I guess something we haven't talked about. I've been traveling a lot as a kid as well. I'm born in Africa, if anything, so maybe that comes from that as well. I mean, I was born in sort of developing country then, and I've lived through wartime in Iraq during the Iraq-Iran war. So maybe as a kid, going through that kind of experiences gave me some more free resilience that I've managed to leverage somehow in my life.
See, and that's interesting. These times of reflection are so important. And for those founders out there, take some time to reflect, because when you reflect, you're able to build a stronger, better you, which therefore in turn builds a stronger, better company. And so what I've got here, yeah, man, so Iraq, so you're seeing war. So you're seeing things that are just desolating, and you're seeing as well Africa, which and then now you're seeing the world as a whole. So man, you're an adventurous individual, but now you have this propelling force behind you because you've seen your surroundings. So you say there is more. There is more out there. And I believe as a creator myself, but also those out there are all creators. There is more. And there is more inside of your brain, inside of a team that you put together to create. And if you guys get anything out of this, let's all create together, because that's what we're doing right now, co-creating content for people to be inspired, through your personal story. So today, let's go over your company, right? And let's fast forward into that, because there's a lot that you discover about yourself, right? Through leadership, through those failures that we're talking about. And I know our previous conversation, we touched on failures and winning with failure. So how did you start to begin to win with failure in, the business that you started? So take me from your seed funding round, okay? And then let's start adding new employees and vendors to your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were maybe a few steps before that. My co-founder and I, we were the both of us working in a management consultancy firm. We were working in change management. So we were very much, after my studies, did an MBA. We're very much into helping large organizations to succeed, and that meant developing internal capacity, the competencies that you would need in a large organization to implement change initiatives. So maybe it's a sales initiative, maybe it's a behavioral change initiative, whatever it may be. So we're working for that for many years. And then, so this is 2012. And we kind of get, after 5 years of working in change, frustrated in a way by what we're seeing, which is, notably Facebook. So we're change consultants, and what we can't understand is how something like Facebook can get to where it is. By that time they've been alive for, I don't know, seven or 8 years. They approaching 1 billion users. I think it's like 800,000 users. And we wonder, what do people find interesting or challenging in scrolling through a feed that is filled with sort of not really interesting things like cats and party hats and all the nonsense that we were used to back then. And especially given that where we come from, which is the field of behavioral, really people behaviors, what drives people to do what they do on Facebook and other social media. And we, of course, driven as we are, we think that we can flip that. We can come up with something that is a bit smarter, that allow people to no longer like stuff from their sofa, but instead get back into real life, and like similar to what we were discussing initially, which is, create a better future for themselves, understand who they really are, get into the world and do stuff that they would actually love to do and love to create for themselves, like a better future, a better self. So we come up with this idea of creating a platform that would have as a mechanism a challenge. So you would challenge your friend or yourself to anything, like, learn Chinese or run a marathon or whatever the case may be. We would create that mechanism because we thought that a challenge was perfect. I mean, not only would we, it's built in our DNA. I mean, we're driven by doing new stuff, but also it would allow us to create those viral effects without having to have any marketing money. Because if I was to challenge you and 5 other of my friends and you were to do the same, then suddenly, we create that positive spiral, and a lot of people get to receive challenges and get engaged into the challenge world. So it kind of worked. So as we moved through that ideation and we raised angel money, and we slowly but surely get away from our corporate jobs, we launched the platform. It is the success that we had anticipated. I mean, a lot of people sign up. And what we discovered then is that although people did sign up, the rate of completion of those challenges were not what we had expected. So one of our KPI or key metric was the number of challenges created. And we did have loads of that. In fact, we had created the system around that very metric, but the conversion which was actually the real metric, because a platform challenge with plenty of challenges but non-completed challenges is like a YouTube without video, or Netflix without series. It's useless. So that very metric was, as it turned out, pretty poor. So people were not completing their challenges, and that really bothered us initially. So we thought, okay, this is a technical issue. We're not technical guys. Maybe we fucked it up somehow. Maybe we didn't design the platform the way it should have been designed. I mean, we knew nothing about social networks. So we had to come up with all sorts of A/B tests and all sorts of attempts, leveraging the money that we had gotten to, make it more exciting, more engaging, more UX, more friendliness, more integration, more of everything, gamification, and so on and so forth. But the result really never changed. I mean, people would create those challenges, they would never complete them. And so after many years of attempts and many dollars spent, we came back to where we came from, which is a behavioral question. That people, it's very hard to do things that are very hard to do. And if you set yourself, and I think it's a great time to talk about this because we're entering January and everyone is all excited and all pumped up with the New Year resolution. It's easy to get excited. I mean, it's easy to get motivated by some guy who talks and it was very engaging and you may get excitement from. But the moment, the curtains goes down and there's no longer this voice of excitement in your head and you stand on your own, are you going to do what is really required to get you where you want to be? And sadly, most people won't. And that was the sad reality. So we had to find different ways to incentivize people, which we tried and failed at. And then we had to pivot. And then we can discuss the pivot thing, but
yes,
yeah, that would be the first part.
I'd love to discuss that. I'd love to get into the pivot and how you have taken, that information, right? So you had key performance metrics and an understanding of ways that you're going to measure your success. And then you guys made a quick pivot. Well, maybe not as quick as you thought you probably should have, but now looking back, but that's okay. I mean, it happens. But quick question before we hit that one is, if you were to go back, today in the very beginning of the company, would you have done anything different as far as research or, formulating a strategic plan to move forward? Explain.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, there's always this question of whether you should go into a business for which you have experience in, like, the industry, the actors, you do have a lot of network, and then go into it because, well, you're ahead of the game, ahead of the curve, or whether you should come, blue-eyed into something totally new, and by asking, different sorts of questions or coming with different angles, you can come up with something new and fresh. And so that's really what we try to do. I mean, again, we were not sort of social tech, PHP, code guys. We're really consultant, sort of framework, strategy kind of people. So we were at odds with what we were doing, and it didn't really work. And then by I guess due to the need to justify the money that we had raised, we had to come up with some sort of solution that would leverage what we had created then and make it somewhat of a sustainable venture, which is where we pivoted.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's talk about that pivot now.
Yeah, so now we have that platform. We don't know what to do with it. Well, the only thing it does, it has a very fancy challenge mechanism built in, and it's really cool UX. And you can, that's what we have. And we have, okay, what do we do with that? So we come from change management, I told you. So what we do is that we call people like HR directors, head of, vice presidents of big corporations, and we tell them that, hey, we have this platform. How about you challenge your employees to do XYZ that is in line with your strategy? I mean, how about we create a little challenge about increasing sales this quarter? Or how about we do a challenge that would reduce inventories with your service guys? Or why not talk about corporate value in these large organizations, innovation and so forth. And so that went really well because it was fresh to the big behemoth, and it was cool, and it was hyped, and it was social, and it was really different than anything else that a big corp would be using. And so it was very easy to get deals, actually. So getting projects was not an issue. So we would challenge a lot of people in large corporations, up to 3,000-5,000 people, doing challenges across the world in this one organization. So really cross-organizational challenges, which was really cool and fun. But then what was tricky was to replicate. I mean, as you know, business, if you can do a one-time deal in one company, well, there's no business. I mean, you have to find a way to replicate, right? You might be hard to get in, but afterwards you need to have some sort of replicability built into the business. And that we found was really tricky, because although a leader would be very excited to challenge his organizations, his staff and his team into doing something, it was very hard for him or her to see an opportunity to take that same platform and do another challenge with that same group of people, because we need variation. That's all about what we do in organization. You need to motivate people in so many different ways so that you don't come into this routine. And so it was very hard to scale from within. So the only thing we could do at that point was to copy paste in different companies, but that becomes not really sustainable unless you build a huge sales organization where you have people banging the phone and going out to sell challenges. And that was not really exciting and not really what we wanted to do. So we had to pivot once more. How do we take that thing and create something that is more, that has more built-in recurrency, more traction in the business model? And that what happened, this is the third pivot and the last. We slowly but surely broadened the scope of what we were doing, and we moved away from just offering a one-time sort of challenge within a company to becoming a enterprise social network. So what we did is that we added functions, a lot of functions, and the end goal was to sell this one communication platform that we would connect all departments of an organization to, and then they would do their business through that very platform. And that is a very tricky business because in that field, you end up competing with the IBMs and the Microsofts and, the SAP and all the big guys who have 10, 20 years of doing that, an army of developers, of salespeople, an organization built around this. And we were still a very young Swedish company, having raised some money, but end of the day, not enough to compete with that kind of monster. So yeah, I mean, we did get some deals. Same thing. I mean, it was long sales cycles, took forever to bring a company, and then it's not that you can unload the truck and leave. You have to really help the customer, because this is more of a that kind of sales. So you have to help the customer, use the platform and so forth. And that becomes, again, not something that, turns quickly the kind of SaaS deal model that you would need as a young company.
So you learned a lot during that process. You learned, the value of pivoting and, making that pivot to where you're continually providing value for the marketplace. That's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
You weren't necessarily emotionally attached to, to the start, because a lot of people will, hey, no, this is the way it's going to go. And we've got to do it. We've got to get to this point because this is where we started out. Because it sounded like, you wanted to create a social network that impacted people's lives through incentive chains that created challenges that then would go viral to change people's lives, right? Well, it's funny because it completely transformed into an enterprise, a social network that allowed for corporations to more effectively and efficiently do their work, that's the story. That is entrepreneurship at its core. And I want to touch on your book. Okay, you spent a lot of time writing this bad boy, and I want to have you tell our viewers out there what it's about, what can they expect really as an outcome reading this book, and where can they grab it?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up the company, so we do that business for 6.5 years, we come to the conclusion that we cannot compete with IBM. In fact, as we get towards the end, Facebook themselves launched what they called Workplace by Facebook. So today it's called Workplace by Meta. And Workplace is very much what we were pitching, which is a social network inside the organization. And so after 6.5 years, we decide that we need to wrap up because, well, our investors are not willing to fund us anymore. And we've spent, quite a lot of time and money, and we've come around. And the alternative is do something small, like, consultancy kind of idea with aided, supported by a tool, a technical tool, or wrap up. And our vision was really to create something huge. And so we didn't want to, go back to being consultants. So anyway, long story short, we sold the platform. And that was it, and we wrapped up as it was. And so as I reflected over those 6.5 years and what had happened and how come did we fail, what a big one for me was, okay, we've been pivoting, we've been doing a lot of things, but it was kind of successful. I mean, we did make money, we did have, we did create an amazing team, we did land huge, like Fortune 50 companies. So if you look at it as the story unfolds and you look at it on paper, it does look fantastic. I mean, we do get traction, the traction that you think as an entrepreneur that, okay, now I'm going to get big. Now I'm going to get purchased by, that kind of company. I'm going to do an exit. But as it turns out, it doesn't really pan out. It doesn't really work the way you had envisioned. And so my question after all those years was, why? Where is it that we failed? Actually, did we fail? And as I start looking around into the what's available on the market in terms of content, I realized that there are very few books or very few content that tell you the true story or the behind the scenes, so to say, of entrepreneurship. Most of the stories that you can get out there are stories of success. And, of course, people are excited they want to learn how to succeed. So what we are offered are, the fantastic story of Tesla and how Jeff Bezos made it and how Richard Branson, sent galactic